What's up, guys? Nate Dog FPV here. Today we're going to be checking out the T-Motor Yema Lite racing frame. So this frame came in the December FPV crate. I've got the FPV crate motors. I think they were called booster motors that they did in a box recently. So yeah, just finished up this build, guys. I have to say it was kind of tough. I typically don't like building on frames that have like a canopy like this or a pod like this. Obviously, as you can probably see there's not a whole lot of room to build in there, so you don't have very much room for your stack, especially if we're doing a 30 by 30 build, which is what this is. So yeah, guys, it was a little tight. Ran into some challenges along the way, like not being able to change my camera tilt. Kind of came up with some creative solutions, like flipping the camera upside down. Ran into some problems with some video issues actually after I got the build finished. Again, went through troubleshooting that as well and kind of got that worked out. So what we're going to check out now, guys, is going to be the actual build video. I tried to kind of document the build process without showing every little solder and everything like that. Obviously at this point most people know how to do the soldering and stuff like that, so I just kind of tried to go through the components and walk through kind of the basic steps I went through, laying everything out, getting the motors put on, getting the stack put on, so on and so on. But anyway, yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video. We're going to cut to some flight footage so you guys can see how that went. Again, we'll have a little bit of footage in there of the troubleshooting process that I had to go through a couple times too. So hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys, be an enjoyable video for you, hopefully find some useful information in there. Overall, I do like this build. I think it turned out really clean, and it does fly well. I mean, I was actually impressed with how good it flew. So no complaints there, but again, like I said, building in a in a canopy or a pod like this can be a little tight. But yeah, like always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, like, leave me a comment, all that fun stuff, and we'll see you on the next one. Alright guys, so here we go with our T-Motor Yema Lite build. So this is the box the frame came in, guys. We'll throw it to the side for now. So here's the frame, guys. Got it all put together. First impressions, I mean, it seems like a pretty good frame. I like the layout of it. Definitely has some nice features to it. You can see inside right here, it actually has some carbon fiber mounts for the camera. There's a little hole in the canopy so you can get to the screws. So I really like that. The fact that they've got the carbon fiber mounts in there and then the canopy kind of goes over it. That's pretty cool. I've seen a lot of canopies where you mount the camera straight to the canopy, and obviously that can cause some problems. So nice to see they've got the carbon fiber mounts on there. Came with this 3D printed antenna mount, which is also again pretty nice. It fits right under the canopy here. Screws on. Of course, it has a hole right here in the bottom for you to run your power leads through. So again, pretty nice design there. I like the way it kind of sticks out the back. It has a little bit of flexibility to it, so it should be nice. Something else interesting, guys, on the top of the canopy they have this little carbon fiber piece that actually screws on to the top of the canopy with those little screws. Haven't really seen one like that before, but in thinking about doing the build, I feel like a receiver would probably fit up there on top of that little plate, and would be a great place for it. I'm not sure if that that's what they intended that to be used for, or if it's just up there to protect the top of your stack or whatever. But I'll be using the RXSR on this build, guys, and I'm pretty sure it will fit up there on top of that plate. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is put it up there and hopefully leave a little bit of room for the other components. That is one thing I'm a little concerned about, guys, is just the sheer amount of room we have right here for the actual flight controller stack and everything. There's not a lot of build space here, so I feel like it's going to be a pretty tight build. So we'll definitely have to be conscious of the space we use and try to keep that stack as low as possible. So real quick, guys, I want to run over the components with you that I'm going to be using on the build, and then we'll kind of go through the process of building it. Not going to record everything so much. I'm going to kind of jump back and forth from part to part. So like the next step, for example, is going to be just laying out the components, making sure everything will fit. So I'm not going to show all that. I'm just going to cut straight to the point where I get the components laid out. So hopefully it'll still be helpful for you guys that way. Again, you can always let me know what you think about that in the comments. So starting off, guys, for motors, we're going to be using the FPV crate booster motors that came, was it last month's box, I think? Maybe last month or the month before. I can't remember now. But anyway, so these motors, guys, I think, for one, are going to look great on here. Obviously, they've got the orange on the bottom, so that matches the canopy. We'll just set one on there real quick. So that looks pretty cool. I feel like FPV crate probably had this whole thing planned out, with the bottom of the motors being orange, and then they do this orange canopy frame. So kind of seems like all that goes hand in hand. So I mean, to me these are the perfect motors to use on this. So I just took one out so you guys can see what that looks like. But we've got our 4 motors right here. For our camera, we're actually going to be using a Runcam Robin. It's actually a little orange camera, orange micro camera. I think this one came in, quad box maybe. We've had this one for quite a while. I know it came in one of the boxes this year. It's just a camera that I haven't used yet, guys. So with it being orange, I figure it'll be perfect for this particular build. So that'll be our camera, is the Runcam Robin. For our VTX, guys, we're going to be using the Race Day Quads Mach 3. This actually came in the quad box double deal, or double down deal that they just did. So yeah, this is the Race Day Quads Mach 3. It has an MMCX connector on it, and it doesn't have a connector, so basically they just give you the wires and you kind of have to solder them to it. I think that'd be good for this particular build because obviously there's not a lot of room, so it's going to be tight. So hopefully I'll be able to put this right on top of the stack is what I'm hoping. Probably put like some kind of little protector plate above the flight controller, and then hopefully put this maybe like, on top of that little plate with some double-sided tape or something. So that'll be our VTX, guys, Race Day Quads Mach 3. Like I said, we're going to be using the RXSR for our receiver. For our ESE, we're going to be using the HG LRC Dyno Shot 4-in-1 BL Heli 32 40 amp ESE. So guys, this actually came in, I think it was it Quad Box? I don't remember. There's been so much stuff lately, it's hard to keep track of it all. But anyway, guys, I think this came in the Quad Box. But I've already used this in one build. Actually, it was a really nice ESE, kind of low profile too, which I like. And obviously, we're going to need something low profile for this build. Comes with your capacitor. Already has a little heat shrink on the leads of the capacitor, which is nice. Comes with a couple connectors, your typical little nylon stuff. So should be a good ESE for this build, guys. And for flight controller, I think we're going to go with the DYS F4 Pro V2 flight controller. The reason I chose this one, guys, is because of its size, really. So if we actually open this up, the profile of this guy is actually pretty small in comparison to a lot of other flight controllers I have right now. So again, I'm trying to keep everything, as low as possible. Also, of course, it has the plug connector for the 4-in-1 ESE. So I'm hoping I'll be able to modify the harness from the HG LRC 4-in-1 ESE to go directly in this plug here. So again, I'll show that, once I get that part of the process done. So we'll be using that flight controller. Of course, it also comes with your XT60 with some leads already there. Comes with this little small buzzer, which is actually kind of perfect for this build, because if I'm going to use a buzzer, it's definitely going to have to be a small one because there's not a lot of room. So I feel like this would be the perfect buzzer for this frame. It also comes with a little flight controller protector right here. So like I was saying a minute ago, we need something to mount our VTX to. So we'll probably use this little flight controller protector and just, double-sided tape the VTX to it. Of course, comes with a little wiring harness as well. So that'll be our flight controller, guys, the DYS F4 Pro V2. Throw this stuff kind of back in here for right now. We'll just set it over to the side for now. And then the last component, guys, would be our VTX antenna, and we're going to be using the Foxy or Lollipop. This has the MMCX connector on it. It's going to be a little tight getting it to fit in here. With the VTX is going to be facing kind of this way with the antenna mount back here. So there's not going to be much room by the time we put this in the 3D printed part they gave us with the frame to actually plug in. So we're probably going to have to do like almost like a little pigtail kind of deal, something like that, where you kind of twist it over to get that to work. But, I've done that before. I know it is bending it, but I haven't had any trouble doing that before. So we'll probably end up going with something like that to get the VTX antenna on there. And yeah, guys, that should be about it for the components, guys. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do any LEDs on this one. Might try to do some on the arm somewhere. Haven't decided 100% yet. But if I do that, of course, I'll show you guys when we get to that point in the video. So, like I said, guys, next step is going to be just kind of doing a mock layout. So not going to really solder anything yet or anything like that. But basically, I'm going to take my 4-in-1 ESE, the flight controller, the little protector plate, VTX, the receiver, just make sure I can get all that stuff to fit in here, without crunching each other and all that stuff. Of course, once I get that laid out, make sure everything's going to work out good, then we'll actually move on to the building process, start wiring and everything. So I'm going to cut for now, guys, and then I'll come back when we've got the layout done. Alright, guys, so I believe I've got the stack layout figured out at this point. So let me walk you through it here real quick. So I did find out that the RXSR will fit up above this little flight controller plate. So you can see it from the top there. RXSR is right up here towards the front. You can see the plug right here. So There we go. You can see the plug right there. So I should be able to just plug it in from right there, you know, kind of push it up on there. Then the wire, of course, will run down to the flight controller. Antennas just kind of poke out the back here, so probably come up with some kind of way to mount them, or maybe run them through these couple little holes right here, like I think those are zip tie holes, so maybe run them through there somehow. But that did fit up in there, so that should work out. And again, I didn't have to modify anything, so that just worked. Over here on the board, guys, you can see that's how I've got it laid out now. So still using the existing screws that came with the frame, and using those existing metal nuts they gave you on the very bottom. Then I've got my 4-in-1 ESC on top of that. Then I've got a single nut here on top of that, a single nylon nut. Those are the ones that actually came with the 4-in-1 ESC. And on top of that, I have my flight controller, again with just its normal little soft mounts on there. Then above that, I've actually added in some little rubber grommets like that. Those are actually the ones that came from the hardware kit that were in this month's FPV crate. So we've got 4 of those. And again, I just needed those to have a little more space for this very top plate where I'm going to mount the VTX, you know, that way it's not hitting the top of the flight controller. But you can see, guys, that does keep the stack pretty low, and still fits everything in there. So then, of course, our VTX is going to sit right up here. So the VTX will sit right on top of this plate with some double-sided tape. And then our canopy will fit on just like that. And guys, it is a pretty close fit, but the VTX can still move around. So you can see I'm still moving it. So it is a close fit, but it will fit in there like that. And then, of course, with my capacitor here, I think what I'm going to do is kind of run it out from the side and ultimately mount it down on the side of the arm like that. So that's my plan there, guys. Obviously, you can see on the top here with the VTX, you actually can't see the screen really, which isn't a huge deal. I mean, obviously this VTX is going to have smart audio, so I can just hook that up and I won't necessarily need to be able to see that screen. I do want to be able to access the button though, so I think what I want to do is probably mount the VTX towards this edge just a little bit, at least enough that I can still get to the button right here. But again, not really going to focus on, you know, being able to see the screen on there, but at least be able to get to the button so I can change channels that way if I need to. So that's that, guys. So that's going to be the layout. One thing I did notice, the wiring harness that came with the 4-in-1 ESC and the wiring harness that came with the flight controller are right here. But you can see neither one of them actually have a plug on the other side, so they're both kind of designed to plug into, you know, itself, and then the wires actually get soldered to the other component. So I'm going to have to come up with some kind of way of modifying these, either splice them together, which is really a lot of work. I think I have some other connectors that I can probably use that have a connector on both sides. So what I'm going to try to do is find another harness that has a connector on both sides and hopefully use that. But the ones that came in there, yeah, that would be a little difficult to stick those together to work like that. So anyway, guys, that's where we're at. I'm gonna work on figuring out the connector now to get the flight controller connected to the ESC, and I'll let you know how that goes. Alright, guys, so got the wiring between the flight controller and the ESC figured out. So I was actually able to use this page on the flight controller instructions. I hope you can see it there, but it actually shows you the pinout of the connector on the flight controller right here. So I was able to match that up with the pinout for the ESC, which the ESC actually says it right above the connector, so it makes it pretty easy to see which wire goes where. So luckily, in my pile of parts or extra parts for flight controllers and everything, I was able to find this connector, which is actually an 8-pin to an 8-pin. Of course, the wires were in the wrong order.
on one side. So basically I was able to leave the wires the way they were on one side that goes into the flight controller, and then I just had to rearrange them on the other side to match the ESC. So now I can use this connector to connect those two together. It should work great. To switch these wires out, if you've never done it, I usually just take an X-Acto knife and you just pull up on these little tabs back here just slightly. Then you can pull the wire out, push the tab back down, and then you can actually push the wires back in, and they lock back in just fine. So that's how we did that, guys. So that's ready now. So next step, we'll be moving on to doing some soldering, getting the other components soldered to the flight controller, getting the battery lead soldered onto the ESC and all that stuff. So I'll check back in with you guys after that. Alright guys, here we go. So we've got the ESC laid out now for the most part. So you can see I've got a bunch of wires hanging off this thing. So let's pull it off and show you what we've got. So obviously I mounted the XT60 connector and the capacitor. And of course this is the one that came with the DYS F4 flight controller, and this is the capacitor that came with the ESC. So we've got those laid out where we want them. These extra wires down here, these are actually for LEDs. I don't know that I have LEDs I want to use right at this moment, but I'm sure I'll add LEDs at some point. So that's why I added these wires here. So basically it just runs off the power and the ground. And then of course we have, two going to the back and two going to the front for positive and negative. So if I'm doing like a tiny LEDs installation, I can basically use these wires to power them. So again, I may not use those right now just because I don't think I have a color that I want to use. But once I get those, might as well have the wires in place. That way it's easier to install them later. So that's that, guys. But everything fits on the stack pretty nicely. One other little change I did make, I switched these nuts out on the bottom of these screws for nylon nuts instead of metal nuts. And again, that's just kind of a precaution. I kind of worry about metal nuts being down there, and I don't know, I know there's the soft mounts on there, which should prevent it from touching anything, but still, just metal being under the ESC makes me kind of nervous, so I did switch those out for nylon nuts. But yeah, guys, that's about it so far. So we've got that done. So next we'll be working on getting the flight controller wiring done, getting our VTX and receiver and camera and all that stuff wired up. And yeah, we're getting there. So I'll check in with you guys once I get the flight controller wiring done. Alright guys, so finally got this wiring laid out the way I want it. Forgot how much a pain in the butt these DYS F4 flight controllers are. I had initially planned on using F-port, but unfortunately could not get it to work with this flight controller. F4 flight controllers in particular are kind of finicky with FR Sky receivers and the inversion and all that crap. So long story short, guys, let me see if I can bring you up a little closer here. So the way I ended up connecting the receiver is actually right over here. We'll kind of look at the pins here. So S-bus is connected to the S-bus pad, so nothing out of the ordinary there. Then we've got our 5-volt, our ground, and I have the smart port wire connected to TX6, which on their little diagram they have that listed for smart audio. But for me, I didn't see the point of having one wire for the video, for the VTX ran to that side of the flight controller, and then one wire for the receiver running to the other side. So that just didn't make any sense. So I'm using that TX6 pad for the smart port. And then of course, because the DYS F4 only has the inverter on the S-bus pad, you have to use the uninverted smart port signal from the RXSR. So you can see here, hopefully you can see that, the yellow wire there is actually soldered to a separate little pad on top of the RXSR, which that little pad is tiny, by the way, so it's kind of difficult to solder it to it. But I have got it on there. So verified telemetry is working, S-bus is working, and all that fun stuff. Obviously, guys, we've got our buzzer on here, so nothing special there, just connected to the buzzer plus and minus pad. For our VTX over here. Let's see, these are kind of tangled up. So pretty straightforward with the VTX, guys. We've got it connected to our battery, plus and minus. We've got the video connected to the video out. We've got the video, or video from the camera, connected to the video camera in. And then I'm actually using the the RX3 pad. Well, excuse me, it's actually the TX3 pad. So let me show you guys this. So on this flight controller, the TX3 and RX3 pads are actually opposite of what they have listed on this little paper. Which really, it's crazy to me that after all this time they still haven't fixed that. You would think at some point they would have fixed the documentation, you know, but because I didn't order this thing that long ago, really, so I would think it would have been updated by now, but it's still wrong. So they have that labeled incorrectly. So I have the smart audio wire for the VTX connected to the TX3, which technically on this paper would be RX3, but really it's TX3. So, but verified that's working as well. So we've got the smart audio working, and then of course we've got our camera being powered off of the 5-volt and ground from the VTX. That's one thing you guys should definitely do if you guys aren't already doing that. Anytime you have the chance to power the camera from the VTX, do it. Because a lot of times if you're having video problems or getting noise in your video, a lot of times it's because the camera is being powered, you know, directly from the flight controller or from the ESE board or from the PDB or something like that. So I've had the best luck with getting good clean video by powering the camera from the VTX. You know, and again, most VTXs nowadays support that option. You know, some of the older ones don't, but if you're in the market for a VTX, look for one that has that extra little 5-volt and ground pad so it can power the camera too. So that about covers the wiring, guys. And of course, I've got the flight controller connected to the ESC with a little cable here. So that's about it for the wiring, guys. So pretty much at this point I'm ready to start assembling the internals here. Once I get all that done and laid out, you know, I can start putting the motors on. Now really the motors are going to be the last step. You know, in this particular frame you're basically going to mount a motor, you know, kind of measure the wires right here and just kind of solder them, you know, right here along these pads on the side. So really I don't feel like I need to do the motors right now. That can be done at any time, or really even after the stack is put together. So that's probably what I'll do, is come back and do the motors after, you know, getting the rest of this stuff on here. So that's where we're at for now, guys. Again, got the wiring done. Again, I picked the DYS F4 Pro just because it was kind of low profile, but you know, after messing with it now and getting it wired up, I really wouldn't recommend that flight controller, just because the F4 flight controllers kind of have some quirks anyway. So if you have another option, probably not a bad idea to use it, just saying. But either way, I've already started with it, so I'm going to keep running with it. But yeah, like I said, we'll move on now, guys, to getting the stack kind of built up a little more. And yeah, I'll check back in with you guys after that. Alright, guys, so here we go with the build progress so far. So I did get everything wired up, got everything laid out inside the canopy or pod, if you will. Obviously you guys can see here things are pretty tight inside this canopy. There is not a lot of room. So I've got my 4-in-1 ESC down here, flight controller right above it. Then I have a little flight controller protector plate with the Race Quads Mach 3 VTX. Actually, I have that taped, just electrical tape to that little flight controller protector plate. Yeah, so everything is in there, guys. The camera is in there as well. But the problem I'm running into is I can barely move the camera at all. So as far as adjusting the angle on the camera, unfortunately, hopefully you guys can see this, but right in here is the plug for the camera. So basically it's hitting, the plug for the camera is hitting on the flight controller or on the little protector plate up here, and basically stopping it from being able to tilt. So
Right now, that's about as much tilt as I can give it where it's currently at. Now, if I tilt it down, I can go down quite a ways, but again, who wants to go down? I mean, this is going to be a racing frame ultimately, so need to be able to get more camera tilt. So what I'm thinking about doing, guys, is flipping the camera. So basically flipping the camera over so the plug is on the bottom instead of the top, and then that should give me plenty of room for tilt without it hitting anything. So I wasn't sure if this camera supported that, so I got on online and went to runcam.com/download, I believe it was. From there, I would found the Runcam Robin, pulled up the basically the full, breakdown of all its components and all the features and everything. And I believe it does have a mirror option, so you can flip the orientation basically. So what I'm going to try to do now, guys, is we're going to take the canopy back off, and I'm going to try to see if I can flip the camera, and hopefully that will make it where I can get plenty of tilt on there and ultimately make this thing usable. Alright, so camera is accessible now. I've got my little programmer cable here, so hopefully the polarity on these match up. Let's see, so blue's on that side, black's on that side. Yeah, they look the same, so that should be good. So we'll plug that in. Alright, set our camera to the side there for now. Hopefully that won't hurt anything right there. Got our little programmer available. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my FPV screen here. And let's carefully plug in a battery. Alright guys, so there you go. The camera looks really orange for some reason. Not sure what that's about or why it looks orange, so orange. Oh well. Alright, so for now, let's see if we can get it changed. So I'm going to hold down, I guess, enter on the thing here to get to the menu. Okay, maybe it's not that. Okay, it's the middle button. I've got it on function. Now if I go into function, I should be able to go down to mirror, and we're going to turn that so I need it to be upside down basically, so let's put the camera the right side up. Okay, so now it still looks the right way. Okay, now does that flip it? Let's turn the camera over now. Yeah, cool. So by setting mirror to V, it appears we have flipped it. So I guess I push enter again. No. Push up. No. Oh, I see. You have to go down to return, I think. So after you set it, you go down to return, push enter, down to exit, push enter. Alright guys, so that should have it flipped for us now. Cool. So I think we should be good now, guys. So now we can mount the camera the other way. Go ahead and unplug our battery, turn off my transmitter over here that's yelling at me. Yeah, and I'm glad this is possible too, guys, because I was thinking about this build today actually, and I was seriously considering just scrapping the whole thing and just ordering a 20 by 20 stack. You know, because when I got to the point of putting the camera in and realized, you know, that I couldn't move it very far, that I couldn't really control the tilt very much. For me, that's just a deal breaker. You know, like, I mean, I have to be able to control the camera. I have to be able to control the tilt. Otherwise, if I can't, there's just no point in even flying it to me, really. So yeah, so definitely looks like we've got plenty of options, guys. I mean, obviously, if you can see the tilt, I'm like pointing up inside of the canopy right now. So then if I bring it down, yeah, you can see we're going full range of motion down too, so all the way down into the canopy. So perfect. So it looks like doing that will make this work much better. And again, yeah, it moves easy. I'm not feeling like any binding or anything on the wire, so it seems like there's just enough clearance for that connector to go through, which is pretty cool. I'm kind of pushing that receiver wire back up in here a little bit, guys, trying to get it out of the way. Alright, guys, so here we go with the motors attached and wired up. Looks pretty good. Motors definitely look good with this frame and the orange canopy, of course. So I like the gray wires on them too, something a little different. So kind of the way I did the motor wires, I try to leave a little bit of extra space on them. That way I can primarily keep them, you know, over the arms. Obviously, right here would be a lot of exposed space. Probably a pretty easy way to get to cut the wires, actually. You know, if you get a prop bends or a prop gets bent and gets down there, it could easily cut the wires. So I think what I'm going to put on top of those is just some little wire protectors like this. These are just, of course, printed in black TPU, but probably put them on there like that, something like that. And they have the two little slots in them actually for a zip tie to go. So since I'm going to be putting the LEDs on the bottom, I'm going to need something there to hold those on anyway. So the zip tie that goes here will kind of double as a holder for the LED that'll be on the bottom. And then of course we'll probably put one more zip tie up here just to help hold, you know, that portion. And again, that will probably help kind of hold the LED wires too. So that's where we're at now, guys. So next part is going to be just getting the LEDs wired up, get those ready. And then of course it'll be, you know, putting these on, putting the zip ties on, making sure the capacitor is zip tied in place, and that should be about it. Then she'll be ready to fly. So I'll check back in with you guys once we get the next step done. Alright, guys, so here we go with everything fully assembled. As you can see, we've got the motors on, got the little shark fin on, have the wires covered up. What I actually ended up doing on the wires was putting the little 3D printed part on top of the wires, then electrical taping over that, and then I've actually got zip ties on holding the LEDs on. These are green LEDs for now. Again, I'm just going to use these for right now because I had them on hand, and I may change the color of those later. But you guys can kind of see here how the wires for the LEDs turned out, you know, coming out of those holes in the bottom of the frame here. So again, it overall, you know, turned out pretty well. Again, it's, you know, definitely a tight build. There's not a lot of room in here to do much, or for, you know, much of a stack really, or a big stack anyway. But I do feel like it turned out pretty good, so I'm pretty happy with it. Of course, I did have to flip the camera, so that's probably going to be a factor for a lot of people that try to use a full-size stack in here. If you try to, yeah, it's going to be hard to get that camera to to work correctly, you know, with how close the stack is going to be to the camera. But again, for me, flipping it over worked pretty well. So I was fortunate that the Runcam Robin had the ability to flip the image on it. So, but yeah, guys, all in all, that's where we're at. So I'm about to take this beast outside and give it a whirl and see what happens. Hopefully it'll fly good. Again, I haven't been a big fan of canopies or pods like this in the past, so I don't really know what to expect. But hey, you know, we're certainly gonna give it a shot and see what happens. So hope you guys enjoy the build portion, and I'm gonna go visit some flight footage right now, and then we'll check it out.
Alright guys, so you just saw my first attempt at flying this thing. Did not go so great. So I tested it first in horizon mode, just line of sight. So obviously I don't have that recorded, but that was fine. You know, in horizon mode it flew fine, everything seemed fine. And then when I switched to acro mode and put the goggles on, basically when I went to take off, it was like it just dunked over to the side and crashed. So took a little bit of thinking to understand exactly what was happening, but let me show you guys exactly what it was. So I've already got the canopy loose here, so I'm going to go ahead and just take the canopy off. Alright, notice I've got my little controller for the camera right here. Now if you guys remember a little bit earlier, I actually did go into the menu on the camera and flip it basically so I could mount the camera upside down to give me room, you know, to be able to move it around and change my camera angle. So the problem that happened, let me get this controller connected. There we go. Alright, so I'm just going to set it back down for right now. And let me grab a battery here, we'll plug it in. Alright guys, I've got my little controller guy. Let me turn on my screen here. Alright guys, so we can see our feed there, everything looks good. Now let me show you guys actually what was wrong. So if I hold down or push enter or hold down enter to go into the menu, let's see. Alright, so yeah, we don't need to be on the Expo menu. So on the first menu there, we're going to go down to function, and we're going to go down to mirror. And now notice I have it set on HV. So when I initially set this, guys, I believe it was only on V. So none. Let's go to V. So V, so the vertical image is flipped, so even though the camera's upside down, the image looks correct, but left and right are actually switched because the horizontal is not flipped. So when I switch it to HV, now everything looks correct and left and right are correct for what the camera's seeing, guys. So yeah, not really a feature I've used before, guys, so that's kind of why I ran into that problem. But I did want to show you guys the full fix on that part. So yeah, I had to switch it to HV, and now everything seems normal. But that's why when I went to take off, and you know, I started turning, I believe, to the right on my joysticks, and then the quad actually just kind of went to the left and flipped over. Well, obviously it's because I was seeing it the wrong way, basically, because the horizontal image had not been flipped yet. So anyway, guys, so if you do end up mounting your camera upside down like I did, just remember the mirror setting needs to be on HV, meaning the horizontal and the vertical axis have been flipped. So cool, so got that fixed now, guys. So we're going to go ahead and do a test flight now, and we'll cut to that. Alright guys, so you just saw that first test flight. It did actually fly pretty good. It felt pretty smooth, motors felt good. The problem though is I was getting a ton of noise in my video feed, and the OSD was flickering. So you gotta figure out what that problem is, guys. One thing I've already tried, I thought it might have been that the canopy was actually pushing down on top of the VTX. I thought that might have been a problem. So what I did about that is I actually took just some little metal nuts and I put those right up under this little 3D printed antenna mount. So basically there's like another little spacer between, you know, the canopy and the frame. And basically that just made the back of the canopy or the pod just stick up a little bit higher when it's attached. That way it doesn't actually come into contact with the top of the VTX. Tried it again after that, guys. Unfortunately, that has not fixed the problem. So I'm still having the issue of, yeah, all that noise. So let me see if I can demonstrate that for you guys real quick. Just on the bench here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in a battery. Alright, I'm going to turn on my screen here. So you can see our feed there. So I'm going to flip it up to Acro mode on my transmitter. Okay. Hold the screen for you guys. So now I'm going to go ahead and arm it, guys. Alright, and you can see a little bit right there, like some little lines kind of showing up. And then as we give it a little bit of throttle, you guys, I'm sure you can see the OSD is just freaking out. Like it's pretty much disappearing, you know, once you give it a little bit of throttle. Just gone completely. So obviously, guys, something is not right. So when I'm giving it throttle, or like I said, when you get high up on the throttle, it's almost like the OSD is disappearing completely. So we've definitely got a problem somewhere. So I've already made sure when I initially wired everything that my camera was being powered off of the VTX. That's usually one thing, you know, that I always do now that seems to kind of avoid this problem of having video issues. But unfortunately on this build that has not done the trick. So even though the camera is powered from the VTX, it's still getting a lot of noise in there somewhere. So at this point, guys, I'm going to have to kind of go through troubleshooting this. So I'll try to walk you guys through this process as I go through troubleshooting this video issue. Hopefully it'll be helpful for someone. So I've already got my canopy loose, so I'm going to go ahead and just set it to the side for right now. Let's just take a look at the top of the flight controller, guys, see if we see anything looks out of the ordinary, any loose wires or not, you know, not good solder points or anything like that. Everything looks pretty good, guys. I've got the VTX is being powered from the battery plus and minus pad on the flight controller. So I'm wondering maybe if the VTX being so close to the flight controller may have been an issue. So let's test this, guys. So let's see if we can figure out a way to lay this out so it'll work. So let's try to put our VTX just kind of over to the side right now, and hopefully we can just kind of set our canopy deal back on here a little. Alright, there we go. So VTX completely over to the side now, guys, away from the other components. So let's power it up again and try it again. Alright, so we got that over to the side. Grab my controller here. Again, we're going to go in Acro mode. Let's turn our screen on. Alright, guys, so we're going to go ahead and arm it. Give it some throttle. Alright, guys, so no difference. So even though we've got the VTX over away from the other components, it's still acting weird. Another thing I want to rule out real quick while we've got this off is the antenna. So again, we'll plug it in. Now guys, I don't think this is going to make a difference, because again, I think my original antenna is fine, but we're going to check it just to be sure. So again guys, going into Acro mode. Here's our screen. Arm it. Alright, so no difference. OSD is doing the same stuff. Okay, so we know it's not the antenna. Alright guys, so far none of that has helped. I don't feel like the VTX being on this little protector plate is really going to be part of the issue. I mean, it shouldn't be. I mean, I've definitely used this kind of, the same kind of method before without a problem, so I don't think that would be the issue. But we may have to access the wiring on the VTX anyway, so for now I'm going to go ahead and take this tape off, which I'll probably put more tape than was necessary anyway. Alright, so same test guys, Acro mode, arm, and throttle. Yeah, no different, same problem. Alright guys, so far the results have kind of been what I expected to see. So I don't think, this wasn't a problem, the location wasn't a problem. So somehow noise is getting into our flight controller and our video feed. So guys, I think the problem is likely the pads that I'm powering the VTX from. Again, I'm using the battery pad on the DYS F4 flight controller. I'm wondering maybe if noise is getting into, the flight controller from the ESCs and everything, and that's what's happening. So what I want to do, guys, is see if I can find some different pads. See if I can find some different pads to power the VTX from. So let's grab our little paper here for the DYS guy. I'm looking for some other pads we can try. So some that are looking pretty good, guys, would be right up here, this ground and 9-volt pad on this on the front of the flight controller here. So right next to the Signal 5 and the RSSI pad, we've got a ground and a 9-volt pad. The 9-volt pad, that's usually a pretty good one to power VTXs from. So I think that's the one we're going to try. So I'm going to do this, guys. I'm going to jump over to the to my solder station. We're going to get the power and ground for the VTX switched over to the ground and 9-volt pad. Then I'll be back over with you guys and we'll test it again and see if we can fix the problem. Alright guys, so here we are back on the table. So I switched the power and ground for the camera to right up here on that 9-volt and ground pad, opposed to the original battery positive and negative pads over here. So let's try it again and see what we get. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. Make sure the VTX isn't touching anything. Alright, let's get our screen turned on. Alright. So just like last time, guys, let's go ahead and arm it. So Acro mode, arm. Well, that's looking a lot better, guys. So notice our OSD is not flickering. I don't see any crazy lines or anything. So that's looking better, guys. So maybe we got it figured out. Let's give it a second here. Then we're going to arm it one more time just to make sure everything looks right. So again, we're in Acro mode. And we'll do an arm. We're giving it some throttle. Yeah, guys, so that looks much better. So we're not seeing any flicker in that OSD at all now. Video looks much better, so looks great, guys. So hopefully it'll be that easy, guys. You know, I've had to troubleshoot a lot of stuff like this in all the quads I've built. Sometimes troubleshooting these can be easy, sometimes it can be super difficult. I've even had some that I've literally given up on and just pretty much, you know, restarted the build, because sometimes issues like this are just, it's really hard to narrow it down to what's causing it. In this case, guys, it does look like the battery positive and negative pad on the flight controller, we're getting some noise into those from the ESC and the motors. So basically, by switching over to the 9-volt and ground pad on the flight controller, I would assume the flight controller probably has a little bit more of some kind of regulator on the 9-volt and 9-volt and ground pad opposed to the battery pad. So I assume by having, you know, that other little regulator on there, more than likely is what cleared it up for us. So I don't know why I didn't use the 9-volt pad initially, guys. I certainly could have. My thinking, or the reason I initially had the power over here, is just because that's, you know, as you guys can see, that's where the other wires from the VTX go, like the video wire and the smart audio wire are all running over here. So it kind of, you know, made sense to put the power negative over there too, just so you had all those wires kind of together. But I mean, either way, running them over here to the front's no big deal. You know, as long as it works, that's all I care about. So looking better, guys. So I'm going to get this beast put back together, fully assembled, and then we'll do another test flight. Hopefully it looks better, and yeah, we'll check with you guys after that.